Imagine a quiet town in the heart of the United States. Friendly people, wooden houses, neighbors who know each other and greet each other in the morning. And in one of those houses, a shy, quiet, helpful man. No one suspected that behind the curtains he kept human trophies. Furniture made of skin, masks of women. What the police found was not just a crime scene. It's a mirror of the human subconscious. Because this person didn't act out of sadism, for pleasure, or to get something like money. He was trying to bring his deceased mother back to life. A mind trapped in trauma, guilt, repression, dependency, psychosis. Today we're going to analyze Ed Gein, a real case so disturbing that it inspired horror movie classics. And it makes us look into that psychological abyss no one likes to look into. And the truth is, behind evil, there isn't always wickedness. I'm Claudia Nicolasa, psychologist and author of Es Manipulación and No Lo Sabes. On this channel, we do deep psychological analyses to help you learn psychology and understand yourself and others. Subscribe if you're interested. Let's travel back to the 1940s to an isolated farm in Wisconsin. A rural, cold, and highly religious environment. The mother, Augusta, was a fanatical woman, obsessed with morality and sin. She saw the world as a dangerous, corrupt place. And she especially saw this danger in women, as if they were instruments of the devil sent to corrupt men.
You must never touch a woman. They are sinners.
The father, alcoholic and negligent, had no authority at home, and in that void, his mother's voice became the law. To him, his mother was not just an authority figure, she was a divine force. He couldn't imagine her being wrong, so when a child can't see their mother as mistaken, they believe the fault is their own. Ed and his brother grew up under Augusta's absolute authoritarian control. Their mother kept them isolated from the world to protect them from evil. But what she was really doing was locking them in their own moral hell. She read the Bible to them every day, especially the passages that spoke of punishment and the filthiness of desire. She taught them that the body was something dirty, that relationships were a form of desecration, that they had to be pure and stay away from women.
Have you brought sin into this house?
As an aside, in the Netflix series, there are some things that aren't true or haven't been confirmed. In this analysis, I'm going to try to stick as closely as possible to what we know actually happened in the real story. But I am going to include or point out some elements that they've taken the liberty to add, especially because of the psychological symbolism and the reason why they've included them. I'll continue. While his brother had a more rebellious and independent temperament, Ed developed a blind obedience. He was a docile, submissive, innocent child, incapable of saying no. His identity and psyche were formed around a single idea, pleasing his mother in order to deserve her love. Something that, paradoxically, never came. Instead, what they received were punishments, scorn, and criticism. Something that can be very destabilizing for a child's mind. All I do is obey and please my mother, but I get the opposite result. So I start to doubt my perception, my reality, my judgment, my abilities, myself. My mind starts to get confused. While his mother never gave him the love he wanted, she made Ed believe he would have nothing without her and that no one else would want him. She was manipulating him to be submissive, compliant, and to never leave her. One phrase she repeated to him a lot was, "Only your mother will love you." It wasn't a warning, but rather a sentence, because that phrase became the core of his mind. If my mother isn't there to love me, my world ends. But over time, Ed grows older and starts to connect with certain sexual urges. And here things start to get a bit dark, but from a psychological point of view, it makes sense. In one scene, he touches himself with his mother's underwear while also suffocating himself. And when she catches him, she forces him to listen to passages from the Bible without any clothes on, in a mix of shame and repressed eroticism.
The idolaters will have their place in the lake that burns with fire and...
We often notice some behaviors that seem somewhat inappropriate between a son and his mother. But why does he act this way? If throughout that entire stage of his psychosexual development, the mother has repressed and castrated
a sexual dysfunction that he couldn't express.
the possibility that Ed directs his erotic energy toward women, and at the same time, she positions herself as the only woman he has to relate to. The only woman who has value, who is valid, who is acceptable. It makes sense then that this erotic energy, that river that needs to find its course, is directed toward the mother. But also, that detail of suffocating himself. He's not just seeking excitement, but to merge, to disappear into his mother. It's eroticism in the service of the annulment of the self.
A kind of morbid fascination.
Later, we'll talk more in depth about Ed's desire to become his mother. Interesting, right? On the other hand, his mother instilled in him this dichotomous view of women, to divide them into two groups in a prejudiced, moralistic, authoritarian way. The virgin woman, chaste, pure, decent, versus the dirty woman, vulgar, indecent, eroticized. For a long time, society has maintained this dichotomous view of women, seeing women from the indecent group as inferior beings, women who do not deserve humane treatment, women whom you can humiliate, treat without empathy, degrade. While your mother, your sister, your wife must belong to that first group of the chaste and the pure. And of course, for them to belong to this group, what you as a man have to do is police their sexuality, control it, and suppress it. This, along with misogynistic treatment and other issues, is why many men can't have fulfilling relationships with their wives. And they end up resorting to paying women so they can act out their fantasies. If sex is seen as something that taints women, then you can't taint your wife. And if sexual relations can only be had with indecent women, then automatically eroticism and sex are dirty. Something that has to be degrading, violent, and even end in crimes, as happens in many cases. This is a very interesting topic. If you want us to go deeper in another video, let me know in the comments. But the important thing I want you to understand here is that the lack of empathy with which, as we will see later, he treated some women is because his mother taught him that they are not worthy human beings. That they are little more than sinful, dirty meat. And that's why the series included some references to Germany back then. God, look at that decadence. I thought they were piles of wood or something like that, reflecting that fanatical ideology his mother had, which divides the world into two groups, taking away humanity and the right to be treated with dignity from that second group. A perfect metaphor for this mind split in two. The superior race versus the Jews, the Holy Mother versus the unworthy, sinful one. If you've seen the series, you'll recall Ilse Koch defended herself by claiming she wasn't harming people, comparing it to stepping on cockroaches. This helps explain why Ed acts without empathy when he takes some women's lives. I'll clarify this later, but I want to state up front that Ed is not a psychopath. Cruelty or coldness doesn't always mean psychopathy. We'll explain this later. Now, let's continue his story. Ed's father has failed as a husband. His brother is also failing as a son. All the male figures are failing or are not living up to his wonderful mother. So, in Ed, the fantasy arises of being the one who becomes the man of the house, the family patriarch, and why not symbolically his mother's husband.
But he wasn't a good son, and that's what I want to be now, a good son.
His father passes away, and Ed, his brother, and his mother are left alone, which Augusta takes advantage of course, to make comparisons and create competition between her two sons.
First an evil son, and then I had you, a son prone to all kinds of weaknesses.
It's very common for narcissistic parents to make comparisons or treat their children differently, so that they try even harder to please and become the favorite and the beloved one. What a delight this mother is. The thing is, when his brother confesses to Ed that he plans to run away with a woman, and what's more, a woman who is divorced.
Mother says you can't. Jenny has been divorced twice.
He doesn't care. He criticizes Augusta and tells Ed to avoid her, calling her crazy and a bad mother.
I'm getting out of here. I have to leave you.
I'm fed up with religion.
Ed can't stand the pain and discomfort that this information causes him, and his primitive defenses fiercely attack an external threat that shakes his fragile structure. His entire psyche has been built around the idealization of his mother, and for someone to question Augusta puts his fragile psychic structure in jeopardy. No, don't talk about mother like that, Henry. In a rage, he strikes his brother and accidentally kills him. Obviously, it doesn't happen in such a violent and extreme way, but many people react negatively when someone comes to show them the reality they are denying. They react defensively, irrationally, even aggressively. When the mind is not ready to accept information that poses a serious threat, it may choose to attack, reject, or push away the messenger. After hitting him, Ed goes into denial. He can't believe what he's done, but eventually he realizes that his brother's body is lifeless, and he cries and hits himself in a childish way, a very primitive act of guilt. Without a clear moral conscience, but with a huge emotional burden. However, let's remember that Ed's mission is to be that good and obedient boy. He can't allow himself to fall short of that image in his mother's eyes. If she had ordered him to do this to his brother, he would admit it easily. On the other hand, this impulsive act, the result of defense and emotional collapse, is also a ticket to the destiny he had dreamed of, being the man of the house. In fact, he did it for his mother. Now, I will be the man of the house and take care of her mother. That's why he decides to hide it and doesn't confess his guilt. Guilt that, later, would return in the form of hallucinations. For a while, Ed enjoys his fantasy, just him and his mother alone. Besides, she is ill, so she depends on him and he can take care of her. What Ed didn't know is that soon a turning point would come in his life and it would completely disrupt his psyche. His mother, Augusta, passes away. When Augusta died, Ed lost more than his mother. He lost his compass, his identity, his source of affection, and his only link to reality. He connected with loneliness and isolation more than ever, and so begins the story of the man who would try to rebuild his mother piece by piece. Let's talk about his pathological psychotic grief. His mother's death wasn't a loss, it was an amputation. Because when someone has built their entire identity and world around a person, losing them isn't just being without them, it's losing themselves. For years, his mother had been his only source of affection, morals, meaning, and control. She thought, felt, and decided for him. Ed didn't have a self of his own. He was only a reflection of his mother's self. His dependence on her is so extreme that he's unable to accept that loss. So when Augusta dies, Ed's world collapses. His mind isn't able to process the loss because there isn't a self that can bear that pain. Instead of grieving, accepting the absence, mourning her, or finding new meaning, his mind does what any desperate mind would do when something is unbearable. It defends itself. Ed Gein doesn't accept that his mother has died. His mind reshapes reality. He goes through mental gymnastics so he can keep quote-unquote his mother, even if it's just in the form of a delusion. Mother, are you there?
You know you can bring me back.
To this fragmented, vulnerable, and fragile mind are added some of the elements that most trigger mental crises: loneliness, isolation, and lack of stimulation. Ed lived completely alone on an isolated farm. He had no friends, partner, or community. Before losing his beloved mother, he had lost his father and his brother. Some figures who, well, at least could have provided some support. And the truth is that prolonged isolation worsens any mental disorder. Without contact with others, thinking feeds on its own delusion, especially in a man who has never truly matured.
You have no idea how to live alone.
How to be a functional adult and manage on your own. An immature, traumatized, confused mind. Poorly developed cognitively, with few coping tools. The scene is one of total abandonment. With a dirty house, full of garbage, poorly fed.
No, this is much worse. You can't live like this.
In the series, Ed is physically strong, but in real life, he was quite skinny and worn out. Even before the loss of his mother, we could identify some characteristic elements of psychotic structures. There weren't any delusions or hallucinations yet, but he appeared somewhat isolated, emotionally blunted and flat, withdrawn, lacking initiative, with behavioral oddities. An impoverished cognitive world and language, childish attitudes, some mental thoughts, something magical. We don't have much information about what Ed was like before his mother passed away. Both real-life neighbors' testimonies and the way the series portrays him already point to a psychotic structure, and that is very vulnerable to a possible triggering event. In this case, Augusta's death. As we've discussed, Ed couldn't accept his mother's death. It's not that he couldn't be okay without her. It's not that he was clinging to the past. We're talking about a pathological and moreover psychotic grief. A state in which the mind, in order not to collapse in the face of loss, creates a reality where that person is still alive. And this is exactly what Ed did. He didn't mourn his mother, but instead brought her back symbolically. He started talking to her, hearing her voice, recreating her presence in the house. We can see how broken his contact with reality is, to the point that Ed even invites people into his house to talk to his mother, so to speak.
Let's go upstairs. You can't live like this.
That way I'll introduce you to my mother. He's not pretending, he's not manipulating, nothing like that. He's in a full psychotic break and it's only getting worse. His mind not only denied death, he believed with that magical thinking that he could bring her back if he reconstructed her body. He starts looking for his mother in the bodies of other women, feeling bodies that physically resemble his mother so he can feel close to her. Now, let's talk about necrophilia. It's not clear or confirmed that in real life he had sexual relations with those bodies. Therefore, we wouldn't say it's classic necrophilia in the sense of having contact with lifeless bodies, but rather it's a search to recover that object of desire, that place where he used to invest his eroticism, his libido, and his affection. Just as he didn't have relations with his mother while she was alive, but his mother fulfilled that role for him, something that Ed then tries to substitute, to replace. In the series, he does have sex with corpses, as well as with two women while they are alive, and this could be understood as a sexual repression that, after the death of the mother, the castrator, is released, but without awareness and in a confused way. In fact, it's that girlfriend he has in the series who encourages him to have relations with lifeless bodies.
The corpses are still warm. Do something about it.
As a quote-unquote solution to the fact that other girls in town didn't want to sleep with him while she was away. And this is something we can see in clinical practice. People who have necrophilia-type fantasies as a solution to that anxiety, that fear of feeling judged or rejected if they have sexual relations with living people. Each paraphilia responds to an anxiety, an unresolved need, a poorly integrated experience. And by the way, since we mentioned that girlfriend they invented for the series, although I know a lot of people didn't like this because it strays far from what really happened, for me this is a symbolic way, and even a way to point out that fandom that exists today around true crime. That fascination, and almost that need or search for grotesque characters who commit dark and extreme acts. That girl who comes across a strange, sick, confused guy whom she encourages to go further because the world of crime fascinates her. Come on, that girlfriend they've made up to me is a way of pointing at us. A lot of people have been outraged by these artistic liberties the series has taken, but the truth is, I think there's a logic behind them. All the references to the movies they created inspired by Ed. All the killers who were fascinated by him. For me, it's a way to reflect how society took the story of a disturbed, very sick man who, yes, did horrible things. Of course, but who doesn't fit that charismatic, cruel, cold, bloodthirsty profile that we like criminals to have. So little by little, with the different versions, stories, and so on, attributes, actions, and legends that weren't true were projected onto Ed. If we measure his fame by the things he did, it's very disproportionate compared to the fame of other criminals who did much worse things and in greater numbers. So, in my view, there was an attempt to turn this person into a legend that many people later acted out in real life. But anyway, let's continue. I want us to talk a little now about Ed's hallucinations, those voices he hears, those things he sees. Ed always hears his mother in that critical voice, judging him, humiliating him, pointing out his flaws. Sometimes he sees Jewish prisoners running toward him because they know what Ed has done. That is, we see that his hallucinations have content related to guilt.
It's the haliterato they know about me. What I've been doing!
That is, Ed feels unconsciously very guilty about everything he has done. But it's not guilt on a conscious level, it's fragmented, like almost everything in his mind. A guilt that is projected onto that external content through hallucinations, voices, and all that content he imagines. A more preserved and organized mind experiences this guilt emotionally and cognitively in a direct way, that is, by thinking, remembering the things they've done, ruminating. But a mind that is so damaged and disorganized can resort to these psychotic elements to manifest and project its guilt. Again, I want to emphasize, Ed is not a psychopath. A person with psychopathy does not feel guilt, delusions, or hallucinations. A psychotic structure like Ed's can develop psychopathic traits due to experiences, learning, or defense mechanisms. But that doesn't make her a structurally psychopathic person. In fact, notice the innocence with which she invites her girlfriend to meet her mother, who is a corpse sitting there. Who are you greeting? My mother, or the innocence with which she lets the police in to see her mother. She passes the polygraph when arrested because she's not lying. It's her reality. So, Claudia, if she's not a psychopath, why does she kill people? Well, in real life, she didn't commit as many crimes as in the series. There are a lot of suspicions about her brother's death, and she is indeed linked to the deaths of 2 women. The first one, Mary Hogan, in 1954.
If you want to be with a girl, I can arrange it.
Anyway, you're not a lady.
A woman who ran a small tavern and was known for being vulgar, direct, and foul-mouthed. The kind of woman who, to a mind like Augusta Gein's, represented sin in the flesh. Independent, sexually free, living without inhibitions.
Hey, kid, either finish your beer or go somewhere else right now.
The second victim, Bernice Borden, in 1957. A 58-year-old widow who worked at the town hardware store. And in the series, she's portrayed similarly to the first victim, that brazen woman who has a relationship with Ed.
Cooking, cleaning, housework, no way!
But in real life, she was closer to the group of the pure ones than the impure ones. And why does Ed take the lives of these women? Well, obviously we can't know, because not even Ed himself probably knows why he did it. In fact, he didn't even remember killing them. Notice the level of dissociation he was experiencing.
Yes, I know. It's not very common, but I don't think I've killed anyone.
In my view, and these are my hypotheses, he kills Mary as punishment, out of anger at her way of life. For years, let's remember that Augusta, the mother, had punished Ed's desire for women. This makes Ed see women who are free, who show themselves as they are, as something outrageous, something ugly, something that shouldn't exist, something that needs to be eradicated. In his mind, they are a target for his anger and rage. They are the worst. They are what is wrong with the world. So what better way to channel his unconscious rage over his mother's absence than to eliminate what his mother hated? Also, in a way, if you notice, when that crueler, more punitive Ed comes out, in a sense it's his internalized mother who is acting. Interjection is a defense mechanism in which the person makes their own, internalizes elements that cause a lot of pain when they come from a loved one. And so, to defend myself from that, I make them my own. For example, if my mother always tells me that I'm useless and that I'm not good for anything, in order for this to stop hurting me, I assume that it's my own belief that I'm useless and I tell it to myself. We see that Ed interjects his mother's beliefs, her criticism, her belittling. His mother figure has settled within his psyche and now governs him. The son stops being a subject and becomes a reflection of his own mother.
It became introspective and turned into illness.
As for Bernice, I think he found some kind of reminder of his mother in her. He found similarities to his mother in her and then used her as a way to get closer to his mother. I mean this in real life. In fact, during the interrogations, Ed said that he didn't want to hurt her, but what he wanted was to keep her. In the series, however, which shows a more liberal Bernice, Ed decides to end her because he feels that she has tainted him by having had relations. He feels very guilty. He believes he has dishonored his mother. And the way to repair that damage is to eliminate the evidence of desire. Leaving aside the possible crimes, what most distinguishes this case is the exhumation of deceased women and what Ed does with their bodies afterward. Ed not only dug up bodies to feel closer to his mother, but he also tried to reconstruct her and ultimately become her. In his house, they found masks made of human skin, preserved vaginas, preserved breasts, and a full suit made from women's skin. It wasn't a sadistic impulse or a sexual fantasy. We're not talking about paraphilias or perversions. We're talking about the materialization of an identity and symbiotic fantasy. That is, Ed had always lived fused with his mother. They were one. And now that he couldn't have his mother, he wanted to become her and be fused together again. Also, in a way, Ed rejected his male identity, being himself, because his mother had condemned him from the beginning. In fact, on one occasion when his mother caught him touching himself, she punished him physically by hurting his private parts and saying that she should castrate him. Ed then interpreted that his reproductive organ was the source of evil, and years later, he would confess that more than once he thought about getting rid of it. In the series, he even questioned if he might be transgender. Hello, Snowy. Want to say hi to everyone? How pretty. Snowy, we're talking about grown-up things. I don't think you should listen to this. Well, I'll continue. In his mind, eliminating his masculinity was eliminating his sin. His desire, his body, his manliness, everything that made him a man had been marked as dirty, sinful, problematic. So, in that fragmented and confused mind, eliminating his male body and becoming his mother was a strategy. It was a kind of redemption. It was his delusional way of cleansing his guilt and reconnecting with that lost love, his idolized mother. He didn't want to be a man who sought and desired his mother. He wanted to be his mother so he wouldn't have to look for her. I know it's complex. Explaining how a very pathological psychotic mind works can sometimes be complicated. Hey, but what is this? Notice that he didn't keep the bodies he exhumed whole, he fragmented them, just like his mind is fragmented.
The things they found in my house are from people I dug up, not from people I killed.
He didn't see women as people, but rather made pieces out of their bodies, fragments with which he tried to reconstruct that lost object. Like a child trying to put a broken doll back together, not understanding that it will never come back to life. In fact, it's interesting how in very severe cases of psychosis, we can see that patients, when they draw a person, they don't draw the whole scene or the complete identity, but rather they draw pieces of the person. Also, Ed would return the bones to the graves. He didn't want them.
He would put the bones back in the grave when he was done.
He sought skin, craving contact, affection, tenderness, and the boundary between the self and the other.
He didn't want the bones. What he wanted was the skin.
Ed didn't want relics or trophies. He wanted affection. With these pieces, we also know that he made different furniture and items for his house. A chair upholstered with human skin, a lamp made with a face, bowls made from skulls. And I think Ed's house becomes a perfect symbol of the state of his mind. On one hand, his mother's room was closed, untouched, preserved, like a sanctuary to her.
I'm sorry, Mother.
That denial of her death. And yet, he lived in the darkest and dirtiest parts of the house, the kitchen, the barn, the basement. That physical division representing the psychological division, upstairs the pure rooms honoring the memory of his mother, and downstairs chaos, decay, the longing for affection, guilt. An abandoned home, dirty, full of garbage, bad smells, darkness, lifeless, without identity. It doesn't seem like there's a self, a human being living inside. And in that home, no. The only things that are cared for, that are attended to, are those pieces of furniture and objects made from human remains. In other words, we see that the only part of Ed that's somewhat preserved is that part of him that seeks affection. He longs for human contact, but he doesn't know how to relate to the real world. And I say preserved, because even though he seeks that affection in a completely pathological way, in terms of mental health, the fact that Ed seeks contact with others is actually something positive. Now, let's move on to that diagnosis. When the police arrived at his house, Ed Gein didn't try to run away. He didn't defend himself. He didn't seem scared, not even worried.
What are you doing here? You shouldn't come and go. Mother wouldn't like it.
There was no strategy, there was no lie. He was a man trapped in his own delusion. During the interrogation, the officers are surprised because he doesn't speak like a killer, but rather like a child. He claimed he didn't remember taking anyone's life. That's right.
Killing people? No, I don't remember doing that.
He said he thought he had dreamed about some related things. And when they finally proved that he was the one to blame, he says he didn't want to hurt anyone, he just wanted to keep those women close to him. And the polygraph confirms it. Ed isn't lying because he lives in that reality.
She was an 8-year-old girl named Georgia Jean Weckler. I didn't kill her.
The psychopath knows what he's doing and may even enjoy it, while the psychotic acts in an altered reality where his behavior seems logical to him. They took him to a psychiatric facility instead of jail, where Ed told evaluators, "I feel like a puzzle and none of the pieces fit." And there's no more accurate metaphor to describe a psychotic mind, fragmented, broken, trying to fit together the impossible. Some psychiatrists diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia. Others claim that what he had was a schizoid personality disorder that, due to his mother's death, became severely destabilized, developing a reactive psychosis in response to that stress. Personally, I would lean more toward the latter. And back then, any case with delusions and hallucinations was automatically classified as schizophrenia because the concept of personality structure wasn't as developed as it is today. Honestly, whether she had schizophrenia or was schizoid isn't really relevant because having a diagnostic label doesn't explain who you are or why, or what you do it for. If we analyze others' lives and behaviors with psychotic labels, we'll see it has nothing to do with him, nor do they relate to each other. That's why in my analyses, you don't see me using diagnostic labels, or at least not early on. Instead, I focus on analyzing the life story of each case. Experiences, their impact, coping defenses, and lessons learned all shape a person. The reasons behind someone's actions can't be explained by a disorder or even by their life experiences. Because experiences impact everyone differently and many variables are involved, I explain the reasons for their behavior and personality. But reasons are not causes, meaning it doesn't imply that someone will act in a certain way. What really matters here is understanding that the mind is incredibly complex. It needs love and structure in order to organize itself in a healthy and appropriate way, grounded in reality. The mind will do anything to protect itself from pain, and sometimes it does so in ways that are incomprehensible or destructive, but always with the same goal, not to fall apart. Ed Gein was not the monster that was portrayed in the movies. He was more like the uncomfortable mirror of what happens when love, instead of healing a mind, traps it and completely destroys it. And maybe that's why his story still scares us so much. Because it doesn't portray evil, but fragility. I would like to end by asserting that psychopathy is not always behind those macabre beings who act in inhuman ways. You can often find them instead in positions of power, in politics, and in large companies. And I also want to add that explaining the motives and pathologies behind this inhuman behavior, in some cases, does not mean at all justifying it or making it less serious. It's about understanding how the human mind works and stopping the use of simplistic labels like psychopath. If you want to see other psychological analyses of these monsters who are not psychopaths, I'll leave the analysis of Jeff Dahmer and the analysis of Joe Goldberg below. Hope you enjoyed the video. See you next time. Bye.